big day in Metro Atlanta, a big day in Georgia, a big day in Georgia history. We are now awaiting the sentence for the admitted Appalachia high school shooter, Colt Gray, who took the lives of 4 people and injured 9 others when he carried a rifle into Appalachia High School back in September of 2024 and carried out an attack that he has now pleading guilty to all 55 counts against him last week. We've now been listening right alongside of you to 2+ days of the sentencing hearing for Colt Gray. The question before the judge is whether to sentence Colt Gray to life with or without the possibility of parole. We heard the last remarks from both the prosecution and the defense teams just about 40 minutes ago. The court is now on break, and we are awaiting the judge to return and render his sentence. Our Marissa Sarbak is standing by right now, live outside of Barrow County Superior Court, where, Marissa, you have been following every development in this hearing. What has stood out to you so far through the closing moments of the proceedings we heard today?
Yeah, of course, closing arguments, Zach, are always pretty interesting. I will say they were a lot shorter than I expected them to be, really only a couple of minutes for each the prosecution and the defense team. The prosecution saying that Colt really deserves to be behind bars without the possibility of parole. That's what they've been arguing with kind of this mini trial that we've had here for the sentencing hearing, and just the many people that they've brought onto the stand to explain this. They wrapped that up in summation today, talking about how he really should not be out in society. Of course, defense are arguing the opposite, saying that they understand he's going to have life behind bars, but they want him to have that opportunity for the possibility of parole at some point in his adult life. So again, both very short, but arguing for opposite things here. And what was interesting, I thought, this morning, Zach, was kind of that continuation that we've heard, the conversations between Marcy and Colt. We did get into this a little bit yesterday, just at the end of the day before court wrapped up for the day. But today we also heard more in that. The recorded phone calls from inside jail when Colt was talking to Marcy. In the beginning of those conversations, it was clear that neither of them realized they were on recorded lines, and the DA might be able to eventually hear those conversations, and that people in the jail would be able to hear those conversations. You could hear Marcy telling Colt that people in the community were comparing him to previous school shooters like Adam Lanza from Newtown, Connecticut, as well as Nicholas Cruz from the Parkland shooting in Florida. Of course, we know Nicholas Cruz has been somebody Colt identifies himself as somebody he finds to be inspiring, somebody he tried to follow in his footsteps. So the conversations between Marcy and Colt were really interesting, Zach. We were hearing Marcy tell Colt that people in the community were hearing that he was comparing, they were comparing Colt to these shooters. And this is exactly what Colt actually wanted. He told at one point, and I want to make sure I get this correct, so I just want to read this. He told the mom, Marcy, to tell the grandmother to get her internet up for her celebrity grandson. So this is something showing that he's quite proud of this. Another conversation, Marcy realizing that people could listen into these phone calls through the jail at some point, telling him, apparently they have audio of you talking to the school shooters. We haven't talked about anything, I don't think, but I don't want them to think that I'm encouraging you to keep murdering. It seemed like Marcy was coaching him through this while he was in jail. Both of them taking a really lighthearted tone from what you could hear on those calls too, which was really jarring. Marcy at many points laughing, Colt also doing the same thing. We also heard testimony, Zach, today from the grandmother. She was getting up for the defense, and she did share a couple of pieces of new information. Of course, we did hear from her a lot during Colt Gray's trial, but today she was saying she wouldn't call them terrible parents, referring to Marcy and Colin, but saying that almost or close to terrible. Also taking accountability, saying that she felt she might be actually the most guilty in this. So quite a few things from today really stood out there, Zach.
It was difficult to listen to a lot of the testimony over the course of the last few days, and today certainly no exception. Marissa, has the judge given any indication as to what factors may be most important in his decision-making, and he weighs what sentence to render here?
That's a good question, Zach. I think one thing that I noted from the judge just before he told everybody to take a break while he reviews all of the evidence and reviews the testimony and just kind of has some time to think about what he's heard the last few days, he asked to see the hard drive. So that's going to be really, I think, a key factor in here, which contains some of those drawings that we saw from Colt's notebook that the investigator Jason Smith had talked about in that interview the day of the shooting when they had taken Colt into custody. He was talking about the notebook that they found that detailed out Colt's to-do list, and that was the day of the shooting. Things that he was telling himself to remind himself to do, how to pack the rifle, how to prepare with what he was going to wear. So a lot of those detailed drawings depicting the classroom as well, Miss Greer's classroom, the classroom that he tried to shoot up, a lot of that was in the notebook. And so those are some of the things on the hard drive that we think the judge really might pay attention to, and specifically asked for just before he told the court to take a break, and he would be back starting approximately at 3:40. But of course, we know he could take more time before he comes out with an answer.
And Marissa, we know that the families of so many of the victims have been in court. They have been following these proceedings from the very beginning. And as we get to this moment where we could, in short order, be seeing what sentence Colt Gray receives, I wonder what the reaction has been and what the tenor and tone has been from the parents, the families, the friends and loved ones of those who were killed and those who were injured in this attack that took place in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, I never want to speak for the family, but I can tell you just in the courtroom, it is excruciating. The emotion has been really heavy, just listening to the victim impact statements, listening to some of the recordings that we did not hear in Colin Gray's trial back in March that we're hearing now that have finally come out, just telling about Colt and these drawings and the premeditated nature that these were showing, drawings and a to-do list, stuff like that, plus the remorse that Colt had shown in the interview with law enforcement, and then law enforcement said that they did not feel that that was a genuine emotion that was coming across from Colt. So I think it's probably a little bit of a mixed reaction and mixed feeling for all of these families. And of course, we have Colt today, and we're expecting his father, Colin, to be sentenced on Thursday. So I can imagine that this is a very heavy week for these families, and to sit there and rehash all of this just a few months later after Colin Gray's trial, I can imagine it's just extremely difficult to do, Zach.
All right, Marissa Sarbak, thank you very much.